Hey guys, it's Hannah and welcome back to the Dyslexic Reader, and today we are going to do my February wrap up for 2020. It was a pretty good reading month for me. It was definitely better than January, so that is a plus. March probably won't be good because the new Animal Crossing is coming out and that will take up my whole life. But until then, hopefully we'll get some more reading done. So I'm just going to go through these in order of that I read them in. The first couple have already gone back to the library, so I'll just put the picture up on screen. So the first one I finished in February was Thunder and Shadow, which is the second in the Warrior Vision of Shadows series, which is like a fantasy series about cats. And I gave it a 4-star. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it had a lot more intrigue and it was a lot more like page turning than the first one, but the first one was kind of more setting up the story and this atmosphere and the characters and stuff, so I definitely enjoyed that. The next book I read was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is kind of like a cult classic, but I had never heard of it until recently, so I got out from the library to try it and I really enjoyed it and ended up giving it 5 stars. It's about a group of university students who are studying ancient Greek and they kind of get into a moral dilemma and things start falling apart. It's very what was that TV show where all the students in their lecture covered the murder? How to Get Away with Murder, something like that. It's that kind of vibes, but it's set in a New Hampshire university in the 90s, I believe, and I think it was written in the 90s and it's set then. And it was very thought-provoking. It was one of those really in your head, and like everyone was morally grey and there was no real conclusion drawn at the end of it, so I thought that was really interesting. Then I read Never Let Me Go by Katsuo Ishiguro, and I give this a 3-star. I enjoyed it. It was a dystopian, again set in the 90s but in a school in England, and it gave me very Handmaid's Tale vibes. The way it was you were kind of dropped in with your character and all the characters knew what were going on but you didn't, and then it was just you were picking up bits and pieces that went on. No one was trying to explain it to you. They were just writing this story as if you knew what was going on, then you were kind of piecing it together. And it's about these children who are raised in this boarding school and they are quite clearly being raised for like a certain purpose, and that's all I want to say about it because I don't really want to get into it. I thought the characters were good. I thought that their motivations were realistic, but I thought that there wasn't much of a twist to it and it was kind of bland in its writing style, and there was parts of it that maybe weren't necessary in the story, so I ended up giving it a 3-star, but it was a high 3-star, just didn't quite make 4. And then I read Shattered Sky, which was the third in the Warriors Vision of Shadows series, and I gave this another 4-star. I really enjoyed it. Again, maybe not as much as the second one, but there was definitely twists and turns of major events happening, so again that was really enjoyable, and I loved the building on certain characters, and I really love stories that have this kind of siblings that end up completely different. It's interesting to see how one event in childhood can affect 2 people separately. This is kind of a tangent, but if you have like 2 siblings and something traumatic happens in their childhood, how they both internalize it and how it can affect them differently. For example, like a parent dying, or even just something more simple, like the personality. Let's say their father's really jokey. One could grow up jokey and the other can grow up with a lack of confidence, maybe because the jokes affected them differently. Do you know what I mean? I find that really interesting psychologically, and there's a bit of that. There's siblings in the Shattered Sky that are very different thought process wise, and that's because of how they've interpreted what's happened to them, and I thought that was really interesting. Now we're getting into books I still have from the library. I read Murder in Midwinter. This is it's not even really a murder mystery because you don't solve it. It's more middle grade thriller, and that's what really drew me to it. I was interested in it because it's about this girl who witnesses a event which leads to a murder, and then the murderer is after her, so they have to ship her off to her auntie and cousin in Wales who she doesn't really like or know, and they get snowed in and the power's cut off and the murderer's after her. So I really wondered how that they would do the suspense in a way that was appropriate to children, and it was less suspenseful and more actiony, and for that reason I gave it 4 stars. But like, the characters were good and it was, you know, just fun and quick and easy. And then I read a graphic novel version of At the Mountains of Madness, which is a H.P. Lovecraft novel, but this graphic novel, Colbard, there's no Christian name for Colbard. It was a very plain, a very enjoyable art style, and I really enjoyed this. I've heard mixed things about Lovecraft's as a person. Like, apparently he can be not a very nice man, so that kind of puts me off his work, and I didn't know that this was one of his when I picked it up. A lot of people say this is a good like entry point into it because it's kind of like a standalone within the series, I think. Don't quote me on that. But it has really got me interested in the world and the concept, so I think I'm going to have a bit of a debate with myself whether I want to go and read these works, knowing that the guy who wrote them's a bit of an ass. We'll have to see. The next one was I was also intrigued to see how it would translate the middle grade, and that was The Lifters by Dave Eggers. And I've read Dave Eggers before, but it's all adult. I didn't even know he had written a middle grade, and he had a very adult style to his writing, and I wondered how that would translate, and it was actually very enjoyable. It was very like, this happened, this happened, this happened, then we went here and I talked to her and she said this, and then we went here and this happened, which can sometimes be horrific, but it was actually done quite well. It was an interesting story about a tunnel system under the town, and there's like a negative force in there, and of course our 2 main characters, who are children, are the only people who could possibly solve it. But it was interesting concept. I think the writing style was weirdly unique, but not necessarily bad, and there was some good points made in kind of just like mental health and how like do you know, if you're a kid reading this, do you know, to understand that like parents go through hard times, and that's sometimes why they do things, and a bit of economics thrown in, so it was interesting to see. But I thought the characters were a bit flat, and again there was parts of this book which I thought could be cut out. It was quite lengthy. It's like nearly 400 pages, and I thought that a lot of that could have been maybe reduced, even though it had a very, like I say, direct writing style. It wasn't flowery in any way, but I still think there was really parts that didn't really feed in, so it was a high 3-star. Next, Dragon Daughter. This is a fantasy, obviously, by Liv Flanagan, and this was about a young girl who sees a man being murdered, and she sees him hide something before he's murdered, and she discovers that it's dragon eggs, and they live in this kingdom which dragons used to live in, but the dragons have been gone for a really long time. And then obviously she's involved in the whole coming back of the dragons. This one for me, like the characters, again, there wasn't much reasoning behind their acting. There was a bit in this about like the siblings who like were raised the same way, but like internalized things is different and like ended up very different. But I felt the characters were a bit flat. There wasn't much motivation behind their action, and it jumped big spans, which I understand. Like, it's a kid's book, it's a standalone fantasy, it has to span years for the story to make sense, so you can't go in that much detail about everything. But I felt like, again, there was bits that were told were unnecessary and too long, and then bits that were kind of missing. I didn't think the writing style was anything fantastic. It was just standard. It was good, it was fine, and I felt myself, even though I enjoyed it, I felt like it was very hard to pick up and continue with. I didn't think the pacing was right. Some of the chapters were like 2 pages and some of them were like 50 pages. And then at the end, they weren't like left in the right place. So when I set it down at the end of a chapter the next day, I didn't really want to pick up and continue. So that was kind of the downfall for this one. So it was only 3, but again, it was a high 3. And then my last book that I just finished in time for the end of the month was The Umbrella Mouse by Anna Faragher. This is one of the first World War II novels that I have actually enjoyed, whether they're centered around the war or kind of branched off just that general kind of time period. And it's because anthropomorphic animals, especially mice, I love it. And this is about an anthropomorphic mouse. They don't wear clothes, I believe, but they do walk around and talk to each other and have a little society. So I enjoyed it. It's about this little mouse who lives in this umbrella shop, and her home is destroyed in the Blitz, and through a series of events ends up fighting with the French resistance. Which sounds weird, but it actually worked quite well. Again, this book was kind of jumpy. I felt like the pacing was off, but the chapters were a good length. I didn't feel invested in the characters, but I think the story was good. I think it would be a really good book to read with children who were learning about the warm time period as like maybe an entry, because there wasn't a lot of discussion. There's background activities happening which tell you about the human war. Obviously these wee mice and animals are fighting their own kind of like war, but there was background references to things that were happening during wartime. I think it's at like 44, so yeah, later on. And it was just interesting to see how they were reacting to the background. So it was a soft entry, and I feel like kids would really enjoy it. And again, it was nice short chapters, and it just came in chunks. This happened, this happened, this happened, and there was gaps and unnecessary bits. But I think for children this would be a good one to read with them. And there was also points that you could choose to either explore more or just leave it at what it is, depending on the child and what you're trying to teach and what you're willing to go into and not go into. So I thought it was good on that point. So I would definitely say for a World War II book to read with a child, or like to a class or whatever, I would recommend checking it out. But for me, just personally reading it, I felt like I didn't connect with the characters. There was bits I was just looking to skim through. The action didn't really grip me, so this was actually a lower 3 stars than the others. I'm getting more critical with my reading this year, so that's why we've got a ton of books that I normally probably would have rated 4 stars are just getting high 3s now. So as you can see, it was a very blue month in terms of books. My earlier books weren't all blue, but when I went to the library to get these, the girls were like, "Oh, are you feeling blue?" And I was like, "No, I'm fine, how are you?" I like didn't get the joke. And then when I got in the car, I was like, "Oh my goodness, I've only got blue books, that's why." So blue in terms of colour, but not blue in terms of emotion or mood. So that was good. And let's see if we can get some stats. I have my laptop here, so forgive me for not looking at the camera, but I'm going to try and get some stats. So I read 9 books this month, and it was just over 3,000 pages. I don't think I am... Every year I try to like not work towards books. I'm working towards 52 books because it's just a nice number to work towards for the year. But I normally try to work towards 36,500 pages throughout the year, because that's an average of 100 pages out. I think a lot of people were confused in my goals video when I said I wanted to read 100 pages a day, like for the year. I didn't mean like every day read exactly 100 pages. I meant by the end of the year I'll have read 36,500, which will have averaged out at, so you know, sometimes I read like 2 books over the weekend, which is like my 600 pages, and then I don't read for the whole rest of the week. But I think we're way off that. I've just had like a lot of different setbacks this year with health and different stuff, so that's not on track. Right now I'm close to 50-50 for POC and not, which is good. I've read over 75% female, which is one thing I really wanted to focus on this year. I think I've only given 1 5-star all year, but the other 2 have like been pretty much 50-50, 3 and 4, and a lot of those 3s have been very high 4s, so I haven't had any really bad books. I've read a real good range of years, from a couple that were published last year. What's the earliest year? 93, I think that was Secret History. So relatively recent books for me. And with genres, I've read 5 fantasies, but other than that, I've read a paranormal, 2 magical realism, contemporary, dystopian, mystery, science fiction, and historical fiction. So that's a good mix. I've read more middle grade than adult, but not a crazy amount. And I've read more physical books and audiobooks, which is always a goal of mine. I love my audiobooks and they're really helpful to me. But I try to remind myself not to just, it would be very easy for me just to read audiobooks. So I always try to make sure that I'm at least 51 to 49% physical books. So that's kind of my stats so far for the year. I'm getting a bit rambly now, so I'm going to wrap this video up. I hope you all had a good reading month. Let me know down below like how it went, if you had any books that you really loved. It's 12 o'clock, so I really need to get going. I know, the wet hair and everything, it's been one of those days. But I'm going to go now. I hope you're all happy, I hope you're all healthy, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye.